Good evening and welcome to the January 10th, 2022 meeting of the Historic Zoning Commission. For social distancing, every other row and seat is blocked in the boardroom. Seating is available and throughout the long hallway outside the boardroom. The public can watch the meeting live on the TV screen outside the boardroom as well as the screen in the training room. Our first item this evening is to entertain a motion to approve the December 13th, 2021 minutes. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Scalf. Is there a second? Thank you, sir, Brian. Any comments? All in favor then of the minutes being approved, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Announcements, Amanda.
Mayor Ken Morse here would like to make an announcement.
This is not the kind of announcement that typically I like to make because tonight we're recognizing Ken Scalf, who is rolling off the Historic Zoning Board. I have a lot to say about Ken, but I'll try to make it very brief because my first encounter with Ken was back in probably about 2008 when he chaired the Sustainability Commission, and since then this city has made great strides as far as sustainability. I'm so happy to see that Ken's friends have shown up tonight to support you. I know you're overwhelmed with it. The other thing about Ken is going to be the shortest serving historic zoning commissioner in history because I reappointed him in December because we didn't quite have a replacement for him, and so he agreed to serve one more meeting. So we appreciate that. But Ken, your service for the city of Franklin for over 11 years, both on sustainability and also on historic zoning, is greatly appreciated. And I would ask that all of your friends that are here, plus those other guests, would take time to applaud you for the service you've given the city. You want to say anything?
The only thing I'll say is it's been a very enlightening experience. The city of Franklin is such a dedicated entity of government, and the character and the quality of life of this city continues to exist, even though we go through many changes. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
And Ken, if I could just say, your contributions, your comments, your opinions on this commission have been invaluable. Truly, we're going to miss you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Amanda.
Mr. Scalf, it's been such a joy to work with you and learn from you during your tenure here on this Historic Zoning Commission. You are a sustainability expert, and having you on this commission has been invaluable in that perspective, as well as your architect expertise. I have learned so much from you on sustainability and working through various projects, and preservation, after all, is a form of sustainability in a lot of ways. So thank you so much for your efforts and the time and the talent that you've lended to this community.
Thank you.
Amanda, did you have anything on the design review?
Yes, I wanted to mention that we have a Historic Zoning Commission Design Review Committee meeting on Tuesday next week, Tuesday, January 18th at 4 o'clock. You'll notice that is altered slightly because Martin Luther King Day falls on Monday. So we'll be here in the boardroom at 4 o'clock, and I'll have that agenda posted as soon as it's finalized sometime tomorrow. I also wanted to note that there is an ongoing proposed historic district design guidelines update. The commission has been very active in that, and we've had a lot of open office hours to extend to our community following our public survey and the launch of the first draft. We have a virtual neighborhood meeting that will be taking place on Wednesday, January 19th at 6 p.m. Again, that's virtual, so that'll be via Zoom. I'll have the link available online tomorrow so that you can all register to attend. We will be covering the key proposed updates to that document, and we hope to have everyone attend that would have any questions or comments they'd like to share with us. Following that, we will have 2 full open office hours days. You can stop into the planning department anytime on Thursday the 20th and Friday the 21st to speak to myself, my colleague Victoria here, and others to learn more about the Design Guidelines update. If you have any specific questions about your property or any other properties that relate to that document. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we're ready to vote on any non-agenda items. The non-agenda process by design is reserved for emergency instances. Non-agenda items shall be considered only upon the unanimous approval of all Historic Zoning Committee members. Are there any non-agenda items considered to be emergency? Hearing none, then, we're ready for citizens' comments on items not on the agenda. This is open for Franklin citizens to be heard on items not included on this agenda. As provided by law, the Historic Zoning Commission shall make no decisions or consideration of action for citizens' comments except to refer these matters to the Planning Director for administrative consideration or to schedule the matter for historic zoning consideration at a later date. Again, this is for non-agenda items only. And tonight, before I see if there are any non-agenda items, I want to talk about the protocol that we've got set up for citizen comments tonight. If a citizen provided an email comment to the commission via staff by the advertised deadline, the comment has been provided to the commission but will not be read aloud to the record. It'll be added to the application record online, however. I do not believe we received any email comments. If you would like to make a comment related to one or more of tonight's agenda items, be sure to complete the comment cards, and I think I have all of them here. Those are available, in case you haven't, by the desk by the pillar in the back. Be sure and include your full name and the number of the item which you wish to speak. For each agenda item, staff will first provide comments, then the applicant. After that, I will call on citizens who completed cards one by one. If there are multiple speakers for an item, I will call up to 4 names on the comment cards at the time and ask that those create a queue in order. Please limit yourself to 2 minutes to share comment at the podium. And I believe we have a timer somewhere. Thank you. And state your name and address when you start. After commenting, we ask that the speakers leave the podium by exiting through the door to the left, under the exit sign to the left of that clock where Chuck Rose is standing. You can then resume your seat in the hallway or in the boardroom. So, having said that, are there any citizen comments for items that are not on the agenda? Hearing or seeing none, we'll proceed on to our first item tonight. Consideration of preliminary historic zoning recommendation for Franklin Grove Estate and Gardens Planned Development Subdivision proposed at 423 South Margin Street. Heritage Foundation of Williamson County is the applicant.
Mr. Chair, before we start on this, I disclosed at design review and want to disclose tonight that I worked at the Heritage Foundation for 31 years. I left in 2017, and I believe and know that I can be fair-minded in the consideration of this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pierce. Okay, Amanda?
I guess I could turn on the mic for everyone to hear. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Amanda Rose. I'm the preservation planner with the City of Franklin, and I liaise the Historic Zoning Commission. Before I share staff's analysis and recommendation for item 1, I'd like to note that the Heritage Foundation, the applicant, has committed to preserving this historic property, the property on the agenda, 423 South Margin Street. And this is quite an undertaking, and it should be commended. The property includes the National Register listed Winstead House and the historic Farrah Fleming House, which the applicants noted as the Hainsbury House on the application materials. It also includes 2 other historic structures. The applicant has met with staff and the DRC of the Historic Zoning Commission several times to discuss this proposal and has engaged the community in various ways, and it is very much appreciated. So before I get started, I do want to clarify the purpose of this items or being on the agenda tonight. The Historic Zoning Commission is providing only a preliminary recommendation to the Franklin Municipal Planning Commission and to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen on whether this project as presented this evening meets the Historic District Design Guidelines as the subject property is located within our Historic Preservation Overlay. The Historic Preservation Overlay consists of 7 districts, one being the Franklin Historic District, and one that's adjacent to this property, the Lewisburg Avenue Historic District. The Historic Zoning Commission is not bound by today's preliminary recommendation if and when the applicant requests a certificate of appropriateness from the Historic Zoning Commission at a future date. The guidelines are used by the Commission to consider exterior alterations that may affect the historic integrity and context of properties within the Historic Preservation Overlay. The guidelines do not comment on use of properties. The guidelines were developed in accordance with the Secretary of Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties, which are developed and maintained by the Secretary of the Interior through the National Park Service. These standards recognize that adaptive reuse of historic properties is appropriate if the minimal change is taken to the defining characteristics of the building, to the site, to the environment. This is essentially a do no harm approach to preserve the tangible and spatial elements of a historic property and to ensure that alterations or construction are completed in such a way as to be differentiated from the historic, but also compatible with the massing, size, scale, and architectural features to protect that historic integrity of that property and its environment. The guidelines also include general policies and policies for each historic district as we develop locally to address our specific areas locally, and those are respective to alterations to building elements such as location, form of buildings, which would be your height, your massing, your scale, to setbacks or locations of buildings, the locations of alterations that could be impactful to context like parking, driveway aisles, fences, walls, also features like relocation of buildings onto properties. The design policies and goals for this historic district state that new buildings should support the character of the surrounding area, and that in areas where historically residential characteristics are located, that the guidelines recommend the preservation of historic buildings and the preservation of the historic residential character and scale of the district. Now I'll go ahead and get into each of the applicant's proposals one by one. The proposal's been organized and analyzed by exterior alteration type, so I'll go through one by one, and I'm going to reference my screen here. The applicant is proposing to alter a couple of the existing buildings on the site. While alterations to existing buildings are more appropriately reviewed by the Historic Zoning Commission through what we call a certificate of appropriateness process, the resulting building forms are important to consider at tonight's meeting. So the applicant's proposing to alter building number 1, the Winstead House, and that's mainly through the removal of non-historic additions on the building, the construction of a breezeway and loggia, and undertaking various fenestration changes. The proposed building form, however, is generally in keeping with the intent of the guidelines, and the Commission will consider alterations to this building at a later date. The Carriage House, which is located here as number 12, is proposed to be reclad. It is a non-historic structure. The applicant's wanting to alter the roof pitch, change the windows, add some architectural features. The alteration of non-historic buildings may be appropriate, and while some of the alterations proposed may not ultimately meet the intent of the design guidelines, the alteration is appropriate in general, and that can be considered by the Commission at a later date. Either of those alterations can be considered by the Commission regardless of a development plan approval. So the applicant's welcome to come forward at any time for those. As for new buildings, the applicant is proposing to build the item shown here at number 6 called the Hall, previously known as the Conservatory. Detailed elevations of new buildings relaying architectural features and detailing are most appropriately reviewed by the Historic Zoning Commission at a certificate of appropriateness stage. However, the resulting building form is attributed to height, massing, scale, footprint, location are very important to consider at the development review stage at this time. So the hall is designed at a one-story scale with a vault to give a 1.5-story appearance. It is proposed to be located to the rear of the Winstead building and the other historic building, the Farrah Fleming Hainsbury building here. Its proportions include a main volume and 2 support wings. And I'm going to go ahead and skip ahead so you can see that. So you can see the main volume here, the 2 support wings, and it also includes a glassed-in lobby area. This is the elevation as you would see if you're standing behind the Winstead house looking backward down Lewisburg toward this property. Its proportions are roughly 109 feet by 56 feet plus this lobby area. The guidelines recommend that building heights be consistent with neighboring buildings in the surrounding area, which is generally achieved by building within 10% above or below that average on the block face. The block face is difficult to define at this location because it's located at an offset intersection. It's bounded by South Margin Street, by Lewisburg Avenue, and by Berry Circle, and 4th Avenue. While the proposed building height is compatible with the historic buildings on the site, it is not necessarily consistent with the height of neighboring residential buildings in the surrounding area. Footprint, which creates the building's overall massing and size, or attributes to it, is defined by the square footage of the bottom floor. The footprint of this structure is 6,113 square feet, which is larger than those on the of the surrounding buildings generally, and also including the historic buildings on the subject property. And therefore, that is not generally consistent with the design guidelines, which state that building size should be consistent with that of adjacent buildings. While this is proposed to be a type of campus, generally speaking, non-historic buildings or infill buildings are recommended to have lesser presence than the historic buildings they serve. With this footprint being larger than that of the historic buildings on the site, it is troubling and not necessarily consistent with the intent of the guidelines. While there's no architectural elevations at this time, which is completely appropriate and understood, the materials may attribute to additional massing or it may downplay massing, but that is something the commission will consider at a later date if the development plan is approved. The eave height of the lowest proportion appears to be 15 feet 10 inches, and then it vaults up with the main volume to a total height of 26 feet and 6 inches. This is a one-story that has the appearance of a 1.5-story because the proposed floor-to-ceiling height, combined with the footprint, creates a form that's much larger than surrounding single-story forms. This location is within a historically residential area, so the guidelines for residential building supply this does not create a form that is typically seen in a residential area. Generally, infill buildings, and with respect to the fact that they're generally reviewed as part of buildings that front streets themselves, are recommended to have lower floor-to-ceiling heights or comparable with historic equivalents. We see equivalents anywhere between 8 to 10 feet, sometimes 10 and 11 for grander buildings, but this height or floor-to-ceiling height is creating a more commercial style form and less of a residential form. And again, I'm speaking specifically to building form and not use. Now I'm moving on to relocation of buildings. The applicant is proposing to relocate 2 buildings on the site. One is to the site and one is within the site. So number 4 here is the smokehouse. This is already on the site. It's existing somewhere in here, kind of behind building number 1, kind of near where the 2 is. The smokehouse is unknown in age. We know it's historic, but it's definitely not in its original location due to documentation that the Heritage Foundation has done. I know there's been some question. There have been a number of buildings on this site over time, and it very well could be in an area where it was at some point in time, but it's my opinion that this building is not necessarily in its original location. The proposed relocation is therefore consistent with the guidelines. Outbuildings are typically located behind principal structures, and so that would be the case at this new location. As for the Lee Buckner Rosenwald School, this is a building shown at number 8 here. The applicant's proposing to relocate this building, which is a significant historic structure, from its current location in Spring Hill to save it from demolition by neglect. The guidelines state that one may relocate a historic building into a district if it does not result in the loss of a historic building in order to do it, and if it maintains and supports the district's architectural character. Since relocation of a building into a new context has the potential of presenting a false sense of history, the guidelines also recommend that one identify the building through the placement of a plaque or a marker that states the original building construction, the original location, and the date it was moved. The schoolhouse does not have strict compatibility with the architectural qualities of the buildings on the adjacent properties, but it is contemporary in age to those buildings and possesses a high level of historic integrity. The location into the district will not result in the loss of historic buildings, but rather the relocation will save an important piece of local and endangered African American history and afford the community the opportunity to learn more about this Rosenwald School and the program associated with it. While buildings of a non-primary use are typically located behind the principal buildings, it does not appear that this proposed building location will interrupt view sheds associated with the historic site. Overall, the school is proposed to be situated in such a way as to respect the site and setting of the National Register listed property and the Hainesbury House located over here. Moving on to parking and driveways. So there is a new drive aisle proposed off of Lewisburg Avenue to access this site. Again, the Historic Zoning Commission is not reviewing the rezoning of this property or the use of this property. The access point is better defined by our traffic engineering team and will be considered as part of an overall site plan that is presented to the Franklin Municipal Planning Commission. What the Historic Zoning Commission should comment on, however, is how the drive is configured and how it relates to the overall site. The drive aisle is similar to the location of existing curb cut. The guidelines do recommend against the construction of circular drives, however, so the creation of a formal circular drive may impact the property. There is currently a non-historic circular drive at the front of the property the applicant's proposing to remove, so I do want to note that. And the proposal here is to offset it so it does not have situation in front of building number 1, the Winstead House. Staff has made comments in the past with concern about how close the hardscape is coming to the historic building here at number 11. The applicant has altered this to some degree, but it is not generally recommended to add circular drives where they weren't seen historically. New parking areas. There is a new parking area proposed at number 15. This is Lewisburg Avenue, and here is that Hainesbury House. Here's the Winstead House. So this would be situated between the side of the historic house and the Lewisburg Avenue street frontage. The guidelines recommend that parking follow historic patterns, which would be typically behind historic buildings. The appropriate location would be recommended to be to the rear of historic buildings. So the guidelines would not support this. The Board of Zoning Appeals is going to consider this request by the applicant to allow for parking to be placed at this location, as it is not in compliance with the Franklin zoning ordinance. So if the Board of Zoning Appeals approves this, then the Historic Zoning Commission will review it to ensure that its screening is appropriate to limit visibility from the street views. The last section is fences and walls. There are a number of fences and walls proposed on the overall site. I'm going to switch to a different sheet. Bear with me just a moment. So in my analysis, I divided it up by colors. The applicant was very helpful in color coding the request. The blue area represents the location of a proposed 8-foot tall ornamental metal fence that would follow Berry Circle to the left, and then roughly the property line till it ties to the back rear property line. And this area roughly corresponds to that proposed drive aisle and that perimeter of the property. While the guidelines support this fence type at a perimeter location at 7 feet, the location along the drive aisle located here at Berry Circle is not in keeping with the intent of the design guidelines because it is in front of, oh, I'm sorry, it's right here, this area right here. It's in front of the historic house here and this historic house here. And the Historic District Design Guidelines recommend that front yard fences or fences in front of houses be limited in height to no more than 3 feet, and that is in tandem with the Franklin zoning ordinance that says the same thing. So that this portion here along Berry Circle and along the property line can be supported as proposed. This portion can be supported if it's lowered in height to 3 feet. Now, the red area is along Lewisburg Avenue. No, wait. They're slightly different. The red area here is on the boundary between the property and the rear of the 4th Avenue frontage properties. So along here and then along the rear property line that backs up to Berry Circle. That is proposed to be an 8-foot tall wood fence to replace some existing fencing and I believe to enhance some existing fencing along that perimeter. The intent is to address some of the concerns of adjacent neighbors. While the guidelines would support the construction of 7-foot tall privacy fences at the rear yards of these neighbors, this height cannot be supported as entirely shown on this plan. The fence section located within 20 feet of the front of this house and forward, so roughly here, is considered a front yard, like I mentioned earlier, so that height would need to be no more than 3 feet, and it would need to be of a style that's not a privacy style. That would be, again, to follow the intent of the design guidelines and meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance. So it would be recommended alternatively for the applicant to consider adding that portion of fencing to the actual neighbors' properties. So it would be on their properties as rear yard fencing and not on this property as front yard fencing. The dark green, that's this area here. This is the area that corresponds to the applicant's proposed secret garden. The secret garden is a 3-foot tall brick wall with a 5-foot tall hedge planted on top. You can see that here. The intent is to create an area that's more specific to quiet and I believe some children's activities. The applicant had proposed an 8-foot tall fence here, and staff had recommended strongly against that because it does not meet the intent of the zoning ordinance or the design guidelines. So the applicant has lowered it to 3 feet with the hedge. To be honest, the design guidelines don't comment on configurations like this. This is a little unique for the historic district. It is not something that we see very often in this area. Generally speaking, the use of the hedge material may be appropriate if the applicant can demonstrate that the view shed of the historic buildings from public rights-of-way is not impacted or limited in any way. The guidelines do state that landscaping should not obscure primary elevations, so we would want to see more information on how this is proposed to be so we can ensure that it doesn't inhibit views of the historic properties from Lewisburg, South Margin, or Berry Circle. As for the purple area, that is here. That's an area that's connecting the back of the Winstead house to the proposed new building at the rear. That's proposed to be an 8-foot tall perforated brick wall. You can see that image right here. Due to the location and the design, this wall can be supported at a height of 7 feet by the design guidelines. So that would adjust this slightly. Getting close, and just a couple more. We have the yellow area. These are representing some retaining walls that are proposed in the front yard at a maximum height of 2.5 feet. And they are proposed to allow for what appears to be hillside plantings, a display garden, etc. These are appropriate so long as the existing topography is not altered extensively as a result of these new elements. We will learn a lot more about grading if this plan is approved by the BOMA during the site plan stage, at which the time the applicant will have much more information about grading plans and elevations for the buildings. The mint green area is here in front of the Winstead House. That is proposed to be a stone terrace wall in front of the house. You can see that here. To be built in front, directly in front of the Winstead House. This is likely the area that presents the most concern to staff in relation to fences and walls. The height of the wall is proposed at 4 feet, and then there is an iron fence that's proposed on top at 3.5 feet for a total of 7 feet and 8 inches with columns. The applicant has not presented plans that demonstrate how the grading is proposed to work, and that's understandable at this time. But because of that, it's difficult to understand how the terrace is proposed to interact with the historic house. Oops, excuse me. The guidelines do not support fences and walls at this proposed height. And further, the location of the terrace indicates there may be extensive grading required and directly in front of the historic house and its porch to accommodate this feature. This alteration is not in keeping with the intent of the design guidelines. And as someone that reviews National Register nominations quarterly, I do have concern that this may negatively impact its National Register listing status. I do know the applicant has spoken with the State Historic Preservation Office, so I'd be excited to hear if there's any contrary thought to that. As for the orange-red area, which is the last portion, that's along Lewisburg Avenue. There is a stone wall here that is it's a small retaining wall made out of a stone, and it's from the 1940s. And then there's a brick wall that kind of goes around the entirety of the property here with an iron fence atop it. The area to the right of this curb cut is historic, and its removal is not recommended. I believe the applicant's proposing to relocate it to a portion closer or further into the site to allow for some road widening or traffic changes to accommodate this site. If the safety or traffic flow is determined to require this stone wall to be relocated as part of that, it would be recommended that this portion of the wall be relocated, reused, and rebuilt in a fashion that is similar in every way to what we see currently. But generally speaking, that would not be recommended unless determined to be absolutely necessary by other City of Franklin review bodies. So overall, the applicant has worked to address several issues that have been brought forward by staff, by the Design Review Committee of the Historic Zoning Commission, and you definitely see that here. There are a lot of changes that are closer to meeting the intent of the design guidelines, and that is very much appreciated. Losing my notes, forgive me. However, the alterations that have been made are not significant enough at this time to meet the intent of the residential design guidelines that apply. So it is recommended that the Historic Zoning Commission provide a recommendation of disapproval to the Franklin Municipal Planning Commission and to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen based on this staff analysis. And if the Historic Zoning Commission chooses to recommend approval or approval with conditions, that the commission be very clear and provide conditions that are measurable so that the FMPC and BOMA, as well as staff and the public, are very clear about what those conditions mean, and they can be defined very clearly. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we're ready for the applicant.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, I'm Barry Beasley, the President and CEO of the Heritage Foundation, and I want to thank you for your guidance throughout our rezoning journey. I appreciate this chance to share our response to your feedback on our proposal for Franklin Grove. I've enjoyed connecting with so many residents and neighbors throughout this process, and while we face challenges, it's made us carefully examine and refine our proposal. We appreciate your interest and your expertise in historic preservation, and we trust you to keep the focus on that as you consider our proposal. We have for you copies of a letter of support from the State Historic Preservation Officer, Patrick McIntyre, and the National Trust of Historic Preservation. We recently shared this proposal with executives from the National Trust for Historic Preservation. Here is one comment from Vice President of Preservation Services and Outreach, Bob Nywig. And I quote, "The National Trust for Historic Preservation strongly supports the Heritage Foundation's planned approach to preserving this historic property, which reflects well-established best practices of historic preservation, including adaptive reuse, infill construction, shared use with income-producing enterprises, and community engagement. The Heritage Foundation's pragmatic and dynamic mixture of new, productive uses is another best practice in historic preservation known as shared use. The National Trust and many other responsible stewards of historic properties work hard to establish and sustain a mixture of educational, interpretive, and income-producing uses at their historic properties," end quote. I certainly understand the neighbors' concerns about any new buildings or activities at Franklin Grove. I wanted to make clear tonight that we are willing to commit to restrictions on the number of events and number of attendees on the property. And after this meeting, I will be distributing a document that outlines that commitment. I've now asked my Director of Government Relations and Advocacy and our lead architect to walk you through our revisions tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, my name is Jill Bergen. I'm the Director of Government Relations and Advocacy with the Heritage Foundation. I'm just here to introduce our proposal for you for Franklin Grove Estate and Gardens. We really want to thank you, first of all, for all the feedback that you've provided on these plans over the past several months. Our Board of Directors, our staff, and our architect and engineering team have taken every single comment into consideration and have made what we feel are significant and meaningful revisions to the plan. I'm going to turn over this presentation to our lead architect, Cyril Stewart, who you know has a long history of successful and thoughtful preservation projects here in Franklin. Before I do, though, we really want to be sure it's said for the record that we will continue to be careful stewards of this property and will be good neighbors while doing so. The Heritage Foundation, of course, has a long history of preservation work behind it. Though the people leading the charge have changed over the years, the mission has not. We're committed to discovering and sharing the stories that helped shape this community by preserving the places where they happened. We understand that change is scary, especially when it happens in your backyard. Because we understand that, we've made drastic changes to many aspects of the plan. And what we've proposed for Franklin Grove is in keeping with what's been happening there for decades. Events large and small took place there throughout the year, every year. Our intent, as part of interpreting the historic site itself, is to provide a space where folks can continue to gather, but in a way, the least intrusive way possible, especially to our closest neighbors. To do that, we propose a building where any noise and activity can be buffered indoors rather than amplified from an open tent. We've observed many other historic sites doing this successfully. As Barry mentioned, we're willing to bring peace of mind to the project by placing a cap on the total number of people who would be allowed on the campus. This is all part of our commitment to the city, downtown Franklin, and the immediate neighbors, which we take very seriously. Downtown Franklin isn't a country club. It's not a gated community with private streets, and it's not a town center concept created out of a pasture by a commercial developer. It's an authentic, successful, historic downtown that thrives because of the mix of uses that exists here in the context of historic preservation. Our site is unique just as downtown is unique. We were told by city staff at the beginning to trust the city's process, and so we're doing just that. We're trusting you to consider our proposal for what it can bring to our community as a whole, And we really do appreciate your time on this. I'm going to hand it over to Cyril to lead you through it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioners, Mr. Chair. I appreciate the ability to be here. Victoria, how much, what's that? Can I talk a little louder? I'll be glad to, sure. How much time do we have left?
We're not at the public comment section yet. It's you. However
Okay,
long you
excellent,
need.
Excellent. There was a lot. Okay, that was a lot to cover here. I just wanted to make sure that I get it covered. So we appreciate you being here. It's not the first time you've seen this project. All of you have seen it before. We came in September of 2020, and you granted the ability to relocate the Rosenwald School to the property with conditions. They can't hear me? How about that? Is that better? Does that work? Okay. Okay, great, thanks. And so we came there in September of 2020, and you granted us permission to move the Rosenwald School to the property. As it turns out, there wasn't enough room on that property in any of the entrances to be able to get that schoolhouse through those entrances. So, but we still plan on doing that. You gave us wise and reasonable conditions for that, and it turned out not to be feasible, but we plan on doing that in the future as part of this. You considered our plans at 2 design review committee meetings, including one on site. You gave wise recommendations for that. We heard you clearly, and the plans you consider today reflect those recommendations. In the submittal that we made, pages C0, 3.1, and 3.2 list each of the points that we heard and the changes that were made to the project. And you'll see this project again if we get to the next stage. All along, we've worked with Amanda for guidance and the approach to this site and the architecture. We intend to continue to do just that, and it has improved all along the way. If we gain rezoning approval, we'll come back to you for another design review committee meeting, as well as an application for certificate of appropriateness. We come to you today seeking approval of this submission with conditions. Rather than disapproval, we ask that you consider conditions to be placed on that would make it comfortable for you to approve this project with those conditions. In my years as a historic zoning commissioner, this tool has been invaluable to ensure that the final project accomplishes the goals of the community. The handouts that you have that we just handed out supplement the information in the submittal and address some of the concerns in the staff report. Well, I have a great respect for and appreciate the wisdom and dedication that Amanda brings to this position. Her guidance on this and 3 other projects I've done in the historic downtown district has been invaluable. However, her charge is to evaluate the proposed projects against the city's ordinance and regulations. As we all know, ordinances and regulations, either here in Franklin or anywhere else, are imperfect tools that are written to cover the majority of projects presented for review and approval. But there's some projects that just don't quite fit neatly into the boxes that we created for our ordinances. For instance, for this project, many of the yardsticks were designed for infill projects or additions in a single-family block face. This campus has no comparable structures nearby and has been a campus for over 40 years. It's for situations exactly like this that you, the commissioners, are appointed to be able to look beyond the limitations of our ordinances for unique projects and to promote those projects that exemplify the best in historic preservation and community design. Well, I'd like to go through some of the comments that are in the staff report and address some of those, and then we'll conclude. As I said, the staff review was based on residential building forms and refers to commonly used measurements like block face, where an infill building or additions are compared with homes on that street frontage in that block. The challenge here is there are no comparable homes to these 2 historic homes on this street. And this 5-acre site has been a campus, not a single-family home, for 40 years. It's been 35 years since there was a single-family residence occupied on this site. A further complication is that the adjacent residential structures have a wide variety of forms, from modest historic single-family homes to multi-use condominiums to apartments and to large recent single-family homes. The scale and massing of the historic mansions on this site call for any new buildings to relate to the scale of these historic structures. while not overshadowing the adjacent homes. Another factor is found actually in the guidelines, which states, the guidelines emphasize the public parts of buildings and settings defined as those visible from the public rights-of-way in front of the property. Building front elevations or facades often contain the elements that define a building style, and these elements should remain visible and unaltered, which is exactly what we plan to do. If changes are desired, they should be situated behind buildings and out of the public view. The pages in your handout show the scale and heights of the adjacent structures, and that the addition of the hall as proposed does not differ greatly from the existing. As one example of this, the hall that we're showing is smaller than the condo building that's located on the other side of that property line, and by a couple of thousand square feet.
Can you say that again?
Sure. The hall that we're showing at just over 6,000 square feet is smaller in footprint than the condo building immediately on the other side of the property line. And the drawings that you have there show some of those property lines and show some of the other buildings around. The apartments are large. Other buildings are larger. Yeah. And we have up on the screen, you can see the site area that shows all the surrounding areas. And so you can see the hall that we've got in light gray, and immediately behind it are the condo buildings that are located right behind it. So those, and our estimation from Google Earth, we didn't traipse onto the property and measure, but our estimation from Google Earth is that that building is 8,000 square feet that's right behind us. And similar things happen with the other condo buildings and the apartments as well. And in your packet, we have little bubbles out to the side. I won't go through all those that show the different building heights in the different areas. A lot of those buildings are comparable in height or taller than the hall. So at 26 and a half feet in height, the hall will be almost invisible from margin, which is 610 feet away. It's not visible from Lewisburg or 4th Avenue, and only a slight view of the roof will be visible from the condominiums to the south. In the section that you have in your packet, it shows someone standing in those condos looking up and not having a visibility of hardly anything within that. The staff report talked about ceiling heights. An 8 or 10 or even 11-foot ceiling height is not comparable to what's in the Winstead or the Haynesbury houses. And we feel that for this structure, it needs to be more relational to those structures than to condos or other single-family homes. The proposed project contains a turnaround area that's between the two historic homes. We have reduced that significantly from the last time that was shown, and continue to be willing to work with staff and with street standards to work on that. We think there are ways that we can bring in more green space. That area now is a parking area and has been for a long time, as well as the area immediately in front of the Haynesbury house. It's an important part of the project in that it's a place for a drop-off for people with disabilities, for school groups, and for others. And due to requirements of the Franklin Street Standards and the Tennessee Department of Transportation, a portion of the site along Lewisburg will be deeded to the city as the additional right-of-way, and all that property will come from the Franklin Grove site for a realigned sidewalk that will be much wider and further from the street, and will provide adequate sight lines for cars exiting the site. In this area is the 1940s stone wall that Amanda referenced. It varies between 30 and 36 inches in height. Over the decades, it's been pushed by the hillside. At least one area is blown out, and I measured with a level and a tape measure and a 32-inch high section of wall, an 8-inch lean on that wall. That's a wall that's structurally compromised. We plan on taking the exact materials that are in that wall now, relocating that wall and keeping the same height and the same scale and the same detailing to be able to satisfy the street standards. If new stone is needed, we will use exactly the same type and stone in appearance. Well, since the earlier comments about parking between Lewisburg and the Haynesbury house, we've significantly reduced the size of that parking lot. And do you have that slide? You can see some of it there. Yeah, that one will be good. We reduced that, brought it further away from the street, and as you can see, from the plan, looking down at the site plan, it's not very clear. But when you look at this, which is an actual scaled representation of that, Lewisburg is where the car is. This is the sidewalk showing a new separation between the sidewalk and Lewisburg, and the rebuilt stone wall, and then that is the berm that is there now that shows the difference in grade. So you really cannot see this parking lot from Lewisburg or from the areas away. There's plenty of room for robust landscaping to screen the parking from that and from the adjacent homes. We understand and agree with the conditions outlined by staff with respect to the fences and the walls. Our proposal is for the front fence, which is different than what's in the proposal, to be retained, that we keep the same brick and iron fence that's there now. There is a panel that says "Oh More." We'd like to remove that, replace that panel with panel to match what's existing. There's one that's damaged. We do the same with it. And then look at creative opportunities for reuse of that "Oh More" panel in a different way that doesn't give you a false impression of what's on the site. We'd like to reuse that existing fence rather than put a larger fence there. With all the other fences, we feel that we can work with staff and come up with reasonable things that will bring us in adherence with the guidelines. In summary, we respectfully request that the Commission approve this project with the following conditions. And these conditions are outlined on a sheet that you have in your handout. Number one, that the hall building be limited in mass and scale to be subservient to the historic structures and the site, that the height not be higher than 26 feet 6 inches, that it not be wider than 108 feet 1 1/4 inches, and not deeper than 66 feet 7 1/2 inches. It will be not less than 73 feet from the south property line. The applicant will work with staff to ensure a compatible scale and detailing for review by the Design Review Committee and by the Commission after an application for a COA is filed. The applicant, number two, the applicant received approval from City Engineering and, if required, the Street Standards Board of Appeals for the entrance and internal drive. Number three, the applicant gained a variance for the parking between Lewisburg and Haynesbury Home from the Board of Zoning Appeals and works with staff to ensure adequate screening. Number four, that the 1940s native stone wall along Lewisburg be relocated as required to meet the Franklin Street and TDOT standards. Number five, that the applicant work with staff and present detailed plans for the area in front of the Winstead House for review by the Historic Zoning Commission for consideration in the COA application, and this be completed prior to site plan approval. And number six, that the applicant work with staff for compliance of the fences and walls, and that the front fence along margin be retained with the damaged and "Oh More" panels replaced to match the existing. Well, it's been a hurried journey through a lot of information, but we appreciate you hanging in there with us. And I'll be more than happy to answer questions about these or any other questions you have about the project.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'm sure there will be.
Thank you.
Okay, we're ready for citizen comments now, and I'm going to call you up 4 at a time, and you can get in a queue. Barry, I don't know if you have any other, do you have any other comments? I've got you, you filled out.
I thought I needed to do it.
Okay, good. Annetta Gaines. And Annetta, just state your name and address again, even though I've got it right here. But
Okay, absolutely. Inetta Gaines, 6608 North Creekwood Drive. Mr. Commissioner and Board, thank you for this opportunity to speak. I am a board member of the Heritage Foundation. We received a letter of support from Bridget Jones. Let me tell you a little bit about her. Mrs. Jones is the founding manager of Bridge Builders Historical Consulting, Director of Equitable Partnerships for Belle Meade Historic Site and Winery in Nashville, as well as the former historical interpreter at Belle Meade Historic Site.
Her work has been recognized by the Smithsonian Institute, NPR, the Tennessean, Condé Nast Traveler, Nashville Scene, the Commercial Appeal, and Garden and Gun magazine, where she was named one of the 2019's 30 Southern Heroes. While I won't read her letter in its entirety, I would like to share a few of her very compelling thoughts on the Franklin Grove property and the Lee Buckner School. Because as a citizen of Williamson County, I feel the same. She wrote, and I quote, "I wholeheartedly understand the importance of investing into Williamson County's Black history for numerous reasons, including but not limited to applying Black voices into a community that otherwise has few telling the whole antebellum Reconstruction and Civil Rights era stories of Williamson County. Through the relocation of the Lee Buckner Schoolhouse to the Franklin Grove campus, the Heritage Foundation will essentially integrate the story of Williamson County at one location and offer an opportunity to provide and promote more inclusive programming, which will in turn bring a more diverse audience to a community that I, through experience, personal experience rather, can say is needed within the Williamson County community. Furthermore, the addition of a gathering center on the grounds near the historic sites will offer opportunities for continuing education, fundraising to further support the institution and its mission, as well as possible interpretive space to strengthen the communal knowledge of the relevance of both the Lee Buckner Schoolhouse and the Franklin Grove campus. I wholeheartedly agree with Mrs. Jones when she states, quote, "I am personally and professionally invested in the proper preservation and ethical interpretation of Tennessee's Black history." Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff Ledbetter.
Hello, Jeff Ledbetter, 1208 Carnton Lane, 37064. My wife and I, we love Franklin. We picked it. It had everything we were looking for. It was rich in history and people that care and love the community. That's obvious by everyone that's here today. I'm here today because I support Franklin Grove. Unlike a lot of people here, I did not attend one of the outdoor events at O'Moore, like Seriously Seersucker or one of the fashion shows at the college. The property's never really been fully open to the entire community. When you look at it, you see history, you see green space, stories that need to be shared, and you can envision what Franklin Grove promises to become. I'm a data guy. My wife and I, we own a software company. So when dealing with data, there's a saying, garbage in, garbage out. The quality of the result depends upon the quality of the input. So several years ago, there was another project that threatened downtown Franklin and had many detractors. It was called Harpeth Square. However, I was familiar with the developers. I knew that they loved Franklin, and I knew that they had Franklin's best interest at heart. So although I did not have a vested interest, I stood by those that did because I trusted the process. I knew the input was good, and I knew the result would be great. So likewise, I feel the same about Franklin Grove. So for years, we've seen positive outcomes from the Heritage Foundation's historic preservation work. I believe that we can trust the input, trust the process, and we know the project will yield amazing results for the community, all of Franklin and not just downtown. It's one thing to save a historic property. It's quite another to create a community, a legacy asset. Franklin Grove will be that asset. Thank you.
Thank you. Ed Silva.
Let me put myself back together and then I'll be ready.
That's hard sometimes, isn't it?
Getting old's not for sissies.
No, it's not.
Mr. Chairman, board members, I've been asked to come before you and just share some of my thoughts of what this project means to Franklin, Tennessee. I've been twice past president of Carnton Association, and during that tenure, we opened the Fleming Center, which supports that project and allows it economically to be self-sustaining. I've been twice president of the Heritage Foundation, I was chairman of Streetscape back when Streetscape had its naysayers, and my good friend Mary Pierce and Rudy Jordan, we ran into headwinds on Streetscape. It was perceived and somehow of a taking of one's rights, or interfering with the free use and enjoyment of the property. But when we finally got through the process and showed the community and showed the vested ownership on Main Street, that this project was not only good for the community, it was good for them, economically and otherwise. And I think we then can reflect back over the last 25 years or so, what Streetscape did to Franklin. And so I'm standing here again, asking this board to look at what we have here. We have a historical resource, which is what Franklin is. It's a collection of all historic resources. And we are, as citizens of Franklin, I personally have a building that was built in 1870, and that's my most proudest achievement, I think, is being the owner of the McEwen German building. And I take with that a great responsibility to maintain that building, because it's been here for a long time. It represents a lot of what Franklin represents. And I see here, I can speak from personal experience. Eloise O'Moore asked me to serve on the Board of Trust when it was a college. And I was delighted to do that. And there were 170 students during that time, an active curriculum. And so I don't want to see this historical revisionism about that site not having activity, not having events, not having traffic.
We need to kind of wrap this up.
And there were 168 students, and for over almost 50 years, there was traffic on those roadways, and there were students going in and out of that campus. And now that we've been in repose for 4 years, the revisionists wanted to look at that period of repose and say there's no activity out there, so ensure that we don't revitalize something that was so important to this community. Well, don't look at, they left in 2018. Let's look at the history from 1970 to 2018, 48 years of it being an important resource to this community, and for being an educational center and providing this community another resource. And I ask that you consider all of that when you look at the big picture here, and not the self-interest of some, but the greater interest of this community. And
Thank you, Ed. Georgia Harris.
I think I'm a little short here. Okay. Well, I'm Georgia Harris, and I'm here. I am a member of the Heritage Society, and I am one of the students of the Lee Buckner Rosenwald School. I started there when I was in the first grade, and I was kind of in and out because my mom moved a lot, but I graduated from this school. This is my history. I always get teared out when I talk. But I would like to see other people go into see the school and see how it worked with no running water, no electricity. And the Heritage Society has done everything they could to satisfy these people. And I think it's turning into what's the word? I think it's turning into some hatred here. They do not want this black school in the white community. And we know this. This always happens when we, as black people, try to bring up our history. Our history and white history is together. You can't do one without the other. And I hate to think that this is turning into something else. You know, not what we wanted to see, not what I want to see. I've lived here in Franklin for 56 years. I was born on Carters Creek Pike. So my history in Williamson County is, I soon will be 83 years old. I know history when I see it. I know prejudice when I see it. I know it when I feel it. There's nothing else that the Heritage Hall can do to satisfy these people. They're doing everything that they ask them to do. And I know that there's something else going on. It's not about the traffic. There's not going to be a long line of traffic to that school. I can't see that. The traffic's already there anyway. I come through there every day. It's full of traffic through there. And the city's talked about that. Everything that's need to be done is being done.
Thank you, ma'am. Sam Gant. Sam. He's coming. Afternoon.
The commission, Chairman. I'm Dr. Sam Gant, 580.
Sam, can you speak into the microphone a little better so they can hear you in the back?
Excuse me. Okay. I'm a Sam Gant, 580 Jordan Road, Franklin. Retired as a professor emeritus of Nashville State Community College. I developed the history department for the college. For the past 2 or 3 decades, I worked with the Civil War preservation organizations here in Franklin. I want to commend the Heritage Foundation for presenting Franklin Grove to the citizens of Franklin and Williamson County as another great preservation site. It will be here, as the Heritage Foundation goals state, that citizens and visitors may engage with art, education, history, nature, and community. I wish to address the goals of education and of history. In order to restore the historical authenticity of the Franklin Grove site, the original gardens must be replicated. Photos and descriptions of the original gardens are available. The plantings, as shown in the original gardens, are best suited for the site and are quite sustainable. Returning the gardens to the late 19th century appearance will make them historically important and allow them to demonstrate the 19th century gardening style. The Civil War made its mark on the Franklin Grove site. On April the 10th, 1863, a battle took place at the intersection of South Margin Street and Lewisburg Pike. On November the 30th, 1864, the Battle of Franklin engulfed the little town. On the Franklin Grove site, reportedly, were 2 cannon batteries which blasted over 1,400 rounds of case and canister into the advancing lines. Before any dirt is moved, a thorough archaeological study needs to be made to identify and interpret details of the 2 battles. To fulfill the Heritage Foundation's stated goals of education and history, issues of the gardens and of the Civil War action must be addressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard Hedden.
Mr. Chair, there is a little bit of a delay between our conversations and it getting out there. So if we wait just a second, I think people will come in.
I think this is Mr. Hedden.
Come on. Thank you.
Got it.
Hello, my name is Richard Hayden. I live at 358 4th Avenue South, Unit B5. I've got my notes that I will read. Please don't think I'm not sincere because I'm reading, but just in the interest of time. But before I read this, I need to address two things that have been said tonight that are factually untrue. One is the rear of the property does not back up to Berry Circle. It backs up to my bedroom window. The other thing is those 5 condos combined are probably about 5,500 square feet, not 8,000 square feet, that are closest to the back of the property. There's been a lot of discussion about how the property will look from the front along Lewisburg and Margin. I'd like to talk about the view from the homes along 4th Avenue, Berry Circle, and specifically Winstead Place and Winstead Court. When I look at my window now, I see the tree, the historic house, and the lawn. If this project is approved, I'll see the backside of a 30-foot tall commercial building, which is going to be about 50 feet from my window. Now, I didn't bring a protractor, but if you look 50 feet back and 25 feet up, that's an angle of about 22.5%. That's going to block the sun. It's to the north, so we're never going to have direct sun, but it's going to put us figuratively in the shadow of this commercial building. I'm also concerned about what I will hear. No amount of double pane glass and soundproof doors on the building are going to mitigate the sound of a wedding party pouring out into the garden to send off the bride and the groom, and the noise associated with the sound of 100 cars starting, doors slamming, and people saying goodbye. A few bushes, a wooden plank fence, and a metal fence isn't going to stop all that sound. After the party's gone, after all the people have gone home, then all the commercial trucks that have to unload the catering, the band equipment, all the stuff that's going to happen all day long as they load in for the wedding reception, and then afterward when they load out, and all that's going to happen after the noise ordinance, after the bride and groom are gone, the father has tipped all the vendors, then I'm going to be laying in my bed 50 feet from that service door, also known as a loading dock in my opinion. All that noise is going to be going on 3-4 times a week. I understand that I can't buy one 1,200 square foot condo and expect to have some tremendous influence on all zoning matters. I also understand that this property was not a neighborhood when I bought my house. I do. But never in my wildest dreams did I think that someone would think that they should be allowed to build a 6,000 square foot commercial building with a late night loading dock 50 feet from my bedroom window. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Largent.
Thank you. Matt Largent, 37 Oxford Glen Drive, resident of Franklin, also president and CEO of Williamson Inc., we're the county's Chamber of Commerce and Office of Economic Development. I'm just going to take a minute here to talk about something we've already seen activated on the property, and that's the Franklin Innovation Center. The Franklin Innovation Center has been in operation since June at the Hayes Berry House, and it's really a place to incubate and launch companies 6 at a time based on the parameters of the house. This idea has actually been planned for about a decade through our Office of Economic Development. It was only through this partnership with the Heritage Foundation and on Franklin Grove's campus that this was allowed to happen. And it really is amazing. This has become a front door for entrepreneurs in Williamson County. And it was also the generosity of Calvin and Marin Lehue that allowed this to happen, to build this out specifically for this Center for Innovation in our community. The current tenants love the space. They love the historic nature of the campus. They love the proximity to downtown Franklin, and they credit their success, at least some of it, to being part of Franklin Grove since they've been in that space. And it's really great to see how they've created this community among themselves, among entrepreneurs in Williamson County, job creators in Williamson County. So I'll just end by saying Franklin Grove allows us to fulfill our mission to support the economic lifeblood of Williamson County, our small businesses. Thank you.
Thank you. Ernie Bacon.
Thank you. My name is Ernie Bacon. My wife and I reside at 224 4th Avenue South. I am speaking against the Franklin Grove proposal, and I have 2 basic points to make. Trees. Yes, trees. I fully recognize this body addresses structure, form, historical built environment. However, just put in your mind when you make a decision on this appropriateness, this proposal will destroy more than 70 trees. As you deliberate, just think of that. The trees will be partially replaced with much smaller caliber, but nowhere near the number. Of these trees, virtually all are native to Tennessee: cherry, black walnut, maple, ash, pecan, cedar, magnolia, and the list goes on for native Tennessee trees. Yes, my wife and I are terrified of the potential noise, traffic, light pollution, trash, and certainly the downstream water runoff. Runoff is my second point. 2 years ago, I became alarmed because muddy water kept going down 4th Avenue only on one side of the street, the side coming from the hill. After I insisted the city investigate, city authorities admitted that two City of Franklin departments had failed to make this application follow regulations after demolishing buildings on this property. After all, I was told, most nonprofits go out of their way to follow the rules. My wife and I join others in objecting to the fact that the footprint of this event venue is going to be larger than that of the Winstead House, and we object to the historic wall being removed on Lewisburg Avenue. Just a note on water runoff, there's 14 homes on 5th, Church, and 4th that back up to a pond that occurs every time it rains from the water at O'More. Don't you know we're really concerned about water and the soil disruption that's going to occur on this property? I realize others will decide the particulars of my argument. I appreciate the opportunity to speak them to you and to the public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bacon. Lillian Stewart.
Good evening. My name is Lillian Stewart, and I live at 201 Lewisburg Avenue. First of all, I just wanted to let you know how much I appreciate the members of the Historic Zoning Commission now who are seated, and also those that I have the privilege on the first board in 1988 to recommend, as mayor, to select, recommend appointments to those who would be seated, and some still are today. And I know that you will be completely objective in your thinking about what's good for Franklin. And that is the way this magnificent property will be developed, we hope, and with conditions, I think, that could be appropriate. Now, as you all know, there are plenty of complexities to all of this. The ones I had thought I would speak to, first of all, the parking area facing Lewisburg Avenue that faces my historic house. The address actually is 501 South Margin Street. It was built about 1840, and I do think it contributes to the downtown character, as does the beautiful properties at Franklin Grove. So addressing the parking area, reducing it, relocating it according to your guidelines, I certainly would hope that would happen. Secondly, I am concerned about traditional landscaping there and the need for that historic, the Winstead House to have the character rather than other plantings that might be more elaborate. Appreciate Mr. Stewart's description of how they would manage the historic stone wall, which is there. One thing I must say to you, I'm convinced that all of my neighbors and those that I have talked to welcome the presence of the Lee Buckner Rosenwald House. For us, that is a step forward to the future, and we are in no way have any objection to that, and I'm sure that the foundation will bring that to pass. Again, this is complex, and it's good to be able to talk to you tonight about concerns. We will follow them closely. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stewart. Tony Roberts.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tony Roberts. I just moved to Franklin about 3 years ago. I lived in Nashville. I have a degree in architecture. I do apologize that I have not looked at the actual plans here. I was asked to come here just to talk in favor of the Rosenwald School going on that site. As far as myself, right now I am actually Vice President of the Board of Arts for Wilson County. I have been on the Arts Board. I'm originally from East Tennessee, and we were talking about different projects. Actually worked on the old city, and that's preservation of the old structures there, and we actually brought it back to life. Have two family members. My mother and stepfather have a company in Atlanta. My uncle has one in Knoxville, and he's actually was responsible for renovating different areas there as well. My heart actually goes to preservation of old buildings. I see what's happened in Nashville, which I think a lot of these things are disgusting. What they did to the longest stretch of historic buildings in one of the longest stretches in the nation, that was destroyed on 2nd Avenue. A lot of the old structures have been destroyed. I am very much in favor of what I have heard so far about this project. It actually helps to turn things around. They were talking about the water leakage. Down in Knoxville, where the world's first site is now, that was actual chaos. The project down there, it was like living in a third world land in that area. They were actually able to fix those through the skills of architects of today, and actually of yesterday, a lot of those problems can be fixed. I'm very, like I said, I came here for one reason, but after looking at this, I want to actually see what's going on here as far as the project itself. What's been brought up here actually helps us to have a new base and a new direction in Franklin. We cannot stay with the problems of the past. We need to correct them. Also correcting, I've been through the area as far as driving. At different parts of the day, traffic is not that great as far as accessibility. With your plans, I've been trying to look at this visually, and I can see that it can actually help the traffic flow and actually help to bring a new promise to the building. As far as sound barriers, they were talking about the noise factor. A lot of those can actually be taken care of as well. We're working on a project in Wilson County now, is the Performing Arts and Visual Center, which should have a lot of focus as far as sound within that whole neighborhood, the Betwood property. And with the architects we have out there, those problems are going to be taken care of as well. So I think that we need to start looking at the design, look at the character of design, and start preserving what we have, or we might be in the same case of Nashville that has lost a lot of its history and value.
Thank you, Mr. Roberts.
Thank you.
Chad Dennis Felter. There he is.
Hello, my name is Chad Dannenfelser. I live at 315 4th Avenue South. My wife and two kids live just a couple hundred feet from the the proposed site. And I just wanted to thank the commission and all the staff members, because I'm typically the person at home with the kids during this time, so I understand your commitment that you're all making away from your families. So thank you for that. Yeah, is that better?
Yeah, that's fine.
I talk low anyways. I'd like to thank, too, the Heritage Foundation. They've done so many things, and I'm grateful for what they've done throughout the years. And I'm grateful for the plan that they've put in place, but there are some things that I would like to have reconsidered and considered, and I'll get to those. But I was excited when the Heritage Foundation took ownership of the Elmore property. And just a couple things that are exciting to me are the renovation of the Winstead House, the relocation and the programming that are being included at the Lee Buckner Rosenwald School. And I'm a gardener. I love the garden. I love the proposed idea of the gardens. I think there are some things that could be tweaked, but I think that's something that could be addressed in a future date. The Lehue Innovation Center, I think, is awesome, and it was great what Matt spoke to earlier. But there are several points I'd like to see be reconsidered and speak specifically to those for this commission. The building in the rear yard is too large for the site and is not compatible with the surrounding residential houses. The parking lot proposed along Lewisburg Avenue, which is a residential historic district, is inappropriate. Please vote to recommend disapproval of this plan. And I had a quote that I'm going to steal from somebody that I read here recently. In downtown Franklin, I have heard, it's in the local, at recent times, it's fragile. With the quote, "The city that destroys its past to build a future has neither." Thank you.
Thank you. Chuck Rose.
Good evening, Mr. Commissioner, Commission. Thank you. My name is Chuck Rose. I live at 335 4th Avenue South. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'll try to cut under 2 minutes. Real quickly, thank you to the Heritage Foundation for all your changes, for all of your hard work. I keep hearing, and I want to dispel some misinformation. I'm reading, I'm hearing, some of it's come out tonight. The group wearing yellow buttons, the yellow sign folks were referred to around town. We are for everything on that picture from the Winstead House forward to Lewisburg Pike, including the Rosenwald School. I think it's an awesome idea. All for it. We want the Rosenwald School. 150%. You could hear the clapping in the background. All the folks couldn't come in here. I promise you that. For the Entrepreneur Center, I helped with the Nashville Entrepreneur Center for years. We love it. We think it's amazing. We are for the growth and the opportunity for people to start and incubate businesses in Franklin. 100%. For the gardens, amazing. Amazing. We're for it. Again, everything in front of the event venue, proposed event venue, we're for. All that the yellow signs mean and these buttons mean, we don't want a commercial business in a historic neighborhood. You guys have a tough job. You ladies and gentlemen have a tough job. But a couple things real quick, if I could say. Someone brought up the beauty of history, the Harpeth Hotel. I didn't live downtown, but I've heard a lot about the Harpeth Hotel and the battle that went on. I think the Harpeth Hotel is amazing, so I know it was tough for a lot of you folks to vote for or against that. That was in a commercial business district. Very, very different than a historic residential neighborhood. Very different. We've heard mentioned the Rochford property, which is across the street from mine. I'm betting the beauty of history, hindsight being 2020, I guarantee you most folks today would say, boy, we wish we didn't demolish that old beautiful home that were there. And I bought a home from John Rochford years ago. I don't even know if you're in here. Sorry if I'm saying this. But I bet you folks would wish they didn't demolish that home and put that apartment complex. Last thing I'll say, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Let's don't lose Franklin.
Thank you. Harriet Harms.
Old age is not what it's cracked up to be.
I'm Harriet Harms. I live at 1010 West Main Street here in Franklin, across the street from the
Could you
old,
speak up just a little more? Thank
across
you.
the street from the old funeral home. And what I would like to say tonight is taken from the Historic District Design Guidelines. And it says the HZC reviews applications for consistency with the guidelines. The HZC is composed of 9 citizen appointees who represent the disciplines of architecture, history, or historic preservation, the local planning commission, and the community in general. The mission of the HZC is to preserve and protect Franklin's historic resources through identification, designation, and design review. All I'm asking of you, this board, is to do your job and preserve and protect this historic property. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Brett Williams.
I'm Brett Williams, 340 4th Avenue South, so the property is directly in our backyard. We've lived at that current address for over 14 years. I have firsthand intimate knowledge of the traffic and activity that has occurred there before and after this purchase, at least since 2007. So I know the kind of activity that occurred at O'More, and the traffic and the sound and whatever kind of events that they had. There are many elements that we love in this plan, and I want to echo the appreciation from everyone before us who have commented on the plan, on the work the Heritage Foundation has done, and really on the beauty of the plan from the main house forward. That is not really in debate here, except, as Chad mentioned, maybe some nuances to the gardens, but we love the idea of the school. We love the idea of the gardens. But the event venue and potential volume of people on site at once for events creates a lot of problems. You've heard about a number. I'll just speak personally. It points at our house. There are at least 12 parking spaces that point into our second story, into where my son sleeps. One specifically, it is a wooden fence beyond the one that we already have, which I guess would have to be taken down or something, would not suffice to offset the ongoing noise of the traffic, the commercial trucks opening and closing, and all the things you've heard already. The applicant has even asked for caveats for adequate screening on the Lewisburg, but there's not adequate screening for the neighbors who actually are impacted along 4th and on the backside of the property. Car lights and noise travel directly into our second story. We hear it like people are walking in our backyard, and the higher volume will just be more disruptive. We have experience with the O'More events, and what has been proposed far surpasses what we've ever experienced in those events that they held, which were sporadic and not many throughout the year anyway. This, along with concerns about the size, capacity, and noise, including that ancillary noise, leads me to ask you to consider voting to disapprove this plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lynn McAllister.
Chairman and Commissioners, thank you so much for being here this evening. My name's Lynn McAllister. My husband and I live at 723 Fair Street. And I'm speaking to you tonight as a neighbor, but also as the president of the Downtown Neighborhood Association. One more time, because it obviously needs to be repeated again and again, I'd like to state that I personally, and for all the people that I am familiar with that are working on this project, are looking forward to learning from the Lee Buckner School. We're looking forward to seeing the art museum. We are looking forward to walking those gorgeous gardens. And I hope, Matt, the next Google comes out of the Innovation Center. Those are fantastic, and we're so grateful for the people who have donated money and for the people who've worked countless hours to get us this far. As I think it has been made clear this evening, our only concern is the event venue. Now, from my stance as the president of the Downtown Neighborhood Association, we do not typically speak about any particular project. We do not typically advocate or oppose. However, I feel like I have some information that might be pertinent to the conversation this evening, because about this time last year, we did a survey of our members and asked them, what do you believe that we should be, those of us that come to these meetings should be speaking on? And what do you think are of most concerns? 5 came to the top. I think 4 of those are relevant for our conversation, and at least 2 of them for what you will be voting on this evening. In the order that they told us, number 1, they asked us to advocate for, quote, maintaining the established character and ensure contextually compatible infill developments. Number 2, to advocate for manageable traffic flow and reduce congestion. Number 3, to advocate for pedestrian connectivity. Number 4, to advocate for maintaining zoning as it currently stands. And number 5, to advocate for strict adherence to the Historic District Design Guidelines. So this evening, I'm just sharing with you what our members told us were important to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Ned Jones.
My name is Ned Jones. I live at 106 Lewisburg. My driveway is located right across from Berry Circle. So one of my serious concerns until I came to the meeting was looking out my front window and seeing the parking lot. Now, assuming that the state and the city and those entities responsible provide proper screening, that won't be an issue. But if I may address some traffic thoughts, since I've lived there since 1994, there are many times a day when traffic backs up in front of my house trying to turn right on South Margin. If this project does go through and there's traffic issues exiting the new proposed exit and entrance, it might be important to consider where South Margin and 3rd intersect, that you consider making that a right turn only, since the highway through town no longer goes that way. It's been rerouted. I don't know if the city can do that or not, but that would alleviate a lot of backup going east out of town on South Margin, which this is potentially going to cause. And the other consideration is the fact that the city approved a landlocked piece of property at the end of Adams. There's 37 new units about to come online there that are going to be rental apartments, and that's just take an estimate, maybe 50 more cars a day that would be increased to the traffic going down Lewisburg. So traffic consideration is my main concern. The noise level is a second concern because I live right across the street. Thank you.
Thank you. Gail Haddock.
I'm Gail Haddock, and I live at 213 Lewisburg Avenue. And I have 3 main concerns. One is traffic, which the former person addressed very well, I think. The traffic there it's terrible now, and certainly will only get worse. I also want to share, I was an alderman for 10 years from 1987 to 97. And one thing, many things stick in my mind, but one has to do with commitments that are made and understandings that are made by applicants, probably with the best of intentions. I remember it came in some conversation that when Pinkerton Park was being discussed, the neighbors said, well, that's all right as long as there's no lighting at night. Well, you know, of course there's lighting at Pinkerton Park now. So whatever zoning allows is what rules the day. And discussions about commitments of noise levels and size of venues and traffic, if the zoning allows it, it will happen, probably. So assurances, even though maybe well-intended, are essentially meaningless over the passage of time. And the other concern I have is water runoff. My mother's house is at the corner of Fifth Avenue and Church Street, and there are water problems there now when there's heavy rain. And so that will probably be worse. I feel like along Adams Street, the infill there has probably made that worse. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. John Henderson?
My husband is one of the earlier presidents of the Heritage Foundation, and preservation of this historical county is something that's so dear to his heart. And he grew up on Lewisburg Avenue. I have relatives that live at the corner of the Aiellos, very active Pooltite, and McPherson's that live on Lewisburg Avenue. We all feel that we would have to ask for the disapproval of the event venue. As an artist, I certainly would like for the preservation of the more, but I do commend, I'm not going to try to repeat all the things that have been said for reasons that the main mansion should be the center focus. That is the preservation. These citizens have lived here for years and years and years. This is their home. This is their ambience of the whole community around them is historical, and the botanical gardens and the trees and the less traffic and so on. If we begin to make this a commercial place, you're going to take away from the preservation. And the Heritage Foundation was started to preserve the historical ambience of the area, not to have it for something that because of the progress of the community. Let's protect what we have in our small downtown area. I think so we would be against it as the Henderson family. Thank you.
Thank you
For the event venue. Everything else is just great. I love the gardens, the art, and all these things would be that, and I think they would add. It seems like we could find, as large as this county, another place for a large event venue that could still support this county and the historical preservation of the Heritage Foundation without having to disrupt the lives of the citizens along this community and this whole area. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Henderson. Now, that's all of the public comments I had. Did I miss anyone? Hearing none, I guess it comes to us now for commission deliberation. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, may I make a comment?
Pardon me?
May I make a quick
Oh,
comment?
yes, excuse me.
I just want to remind you, as you deliberate this evening, that the request is to provide a recommendation, a preliminary recommendation to the FMPC and the BOMA as related to how this proposal would or would not meet the Historic District Design Guidelines. The FMPC and BOMA will make decisions about use. We've heard from 18 citizens today. Every single one of them have opinions that are valid, and we very much appreciate them sharing them today. I just want it to be clear for the public, for yourselves, for the applicant, that the commission is charged here today to look at how the proposal meets the design guidelines and provide that information to the folks who make the decisions about use, water, traffic, et cetera. So please keep your comments in relation to the items that relate to the Historic District Design Guidelines, and note that staff is supportive of a number of items on this proposal as I outlined earlier, but there are some that need some alterations in order to better meet the intent of those guidelines. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
recommendation or disapproval of the Franklin Grove Development Plan to the February 14 Historic Zoning Commission meeting.
Is there a second to Brian's motion to defer? And the reason for that?
The reason for that, and I do express my appreciation to the Heritage Foundation for saving places that matter. But I do agree with staff that there's a lot of work yet to be done in the plan of Franklin Grove actually complying with historic zoning and historic guidelines. And making a patchwork today of conditions that's spontaneous, I think is rushing the process, and we should take more time that benefits the Heritage Foundation and the community.
Is there a second to Brian's motion?
Second.
Thank you, Kim. Any discussion on that?
Well, if we did this, it would be good to have a design review workshop, maybe just for this item, if that's possible.
I mean, I think that's up to the applicant to, and the next design review would be Monday.
Monday, and that could be, I don't know how many items are on that agenda.
I don't have any idea. Any other discussion?
Yeah, I'm not necessarily against the deferral. I guess I'm just trying to understand what it would accomplish.
Yeah.
You know, between today and February 14th, what's going to change? I think our objective today is to make a recommendation, a preliminary recommendation. Yeah, I'm sorry. I think our objective this evening is to make a preliminary recommendation, and I guess I'm just trying to understand what would change between now and February 14th.
I'm not necessarily recommending that we have a design review committee meeting this next Monday. It can happen anytime between there, or even next month. We could defer it to March and give more time for the applicant. But there are a lot of issues that do not meet the guidelines.
Based on those issues, I was going to make a motion to recommend denial. Of course, deferral always is helpful because sometimes the outcome can be surprising. In this case, the applicants have appeared at design review two or three times, and I know they've made adaptations to the plan. I'm with Mr. Mann in terms of how much further we can see changes to the plan unless something drastic changes. And in my mind, that drastic change needs to be the hall. To me, that's the most inconsistent part of this plan, is the hall.
Anybody else?
I would agree with that. The only way I could recommend any approval with a condition is the condition would be the entire removal of the hall, which I don't know that that's a valuable approval with condition at this stage.
Based on whatever you want it to make. I'm in agreement with Ms. Marquardt and Mr. Mann. I do not see any reason to kick this can down the road. I think we need, I don't know what could possibly change other than as Mr. Mann said, the elimination of the hall or a drastic reduction in that size. I don't know what else could be done to it. Everything else is, I think everybody else agrees that it is well done. It is a great plan. A lot of time, effort has been spent in developing it and getting it to this stage. So I see no reason to defer it. So I would vote against deferral.
I believe Ms. Pierce seconded the deferral, so I think we need to vote on that.
Ken did.
Or
Ken did.
I'm sorry.
We've got to vote. Are there any other comments relative to the deferral? Kathy?
I would support deferring it only because we were handed out these lists of approved on these conditions, and so I need to absorb this and review it further to understand what other changes are they trying to amend to make it
Well,
meet
this
the
is from the
guidelines?
staff. Our staff gave us that.
No, if I may, the applicant provided the recommended conditions of approval just this afternoon, and that was to share with you all. He put it in hard copy for you to be able to access and follow along as he spoke at the podium.
Well, there are two sets of documents that we got this afternoon, one from the applicant and one from,
I provided a document that listed every item that's included, and if the commission were to decide to approve with conditions, to ensure that you address each item individually. But it doesn't provide any sort of recommendation contrary to the one I gave you.
okay.
And that's the reason for the deferral, to give time to discuss this issue with staff and with the applicant. But I agree with Ms. Markwart and Mr. Mann that otherwise I would be voting for disapproval.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Position.
Okay, so are we ready to vote then? Then, as a show of hands, if you are in favor of the deferral, please raise your hand. And against the deferral? So it's 4-3 to defer this to the February 14th Historic Zoning meeting. Now, is there any other guidance that we should give the applicant at this stage before that meeting and possibly before they come to design review next Monday, if they so choose?
Well, the guidance that I would offer to the applicants is that there are a lot of opinions about historic structures and things you should and should not do. But we are tasked with the Franklin's historic guidelines and going by those guidelines. And those guidelines are important. And the massing and scale of the event center or the hall, let's call it the hall, is not in keeping with the guidelines. In fact, you can go through at least 10 items that in the proposal that do not comply with the guidelines. And just because I think it does need to be addressed has to do with the grand and the not so grand. So we talk about preserving things that are grand and sometimes forget about things that are not so grand. And they have relation to each other. And they show us how things were. And I'm going to bring that up on the smokehouse. So, and actually the smokehouse, we could actually call it the outbuilding because there's no evidence it was a smokehouse. And we even have that in the Heritage Foundation's report. But this is what the report actually says about that building. It says, it isn't clear whether this structure was built on the site or relocated, and the exact location isn't known. So it's great when we as historians are humble and say we don't know. But what we do know is this. According to the Sanborn maps published in 1898, 1903, 1908, 1913, and 1928, there was an outbuilding in that location on the property. And when you look at aerial photography starting in 1958, the building is shown on that property all the way up to today. Our guidelines say don't move historic structures. And I would say that would be some guidance that I would offer in considering how to incorporate the existing building in its location with the Pear Garden rather than moving it to accommodate the Pear Garden. And that would be one of my main suggestion other than the compliance with the guidelines. The hall has to be subordinate to the historic structure. And I welcome any other comments from our commission.
Yeah, I don't think it achieves being subordinate to the historic home. And you always want to try to look at every possibility to make something work. But if you just look at the site plan, I think it pops out as being overscale.
Ken?
I think the plan as proposed compromises too much of the existing site to accomplish the goals of creating an event center.
Okay. So the event center, or the hall, is the major issue on the whole project. So we voted to defer it, and I don't agree with that, but that's the wisdom of the group, so that's fine. But I
Mr.
don't know
Chair.
what's going to change by February the 14th, unless that goes away.
Hope springeth eternal, Mr. Chair.
No. I've heard that before. Okay, so is there any other comments? Any other item on this? Any other comment on this? All right, we stand deferred then of February the 14th on this topic.
That'll work.
And I'm going to ask for a 10-minute recess if there is a motion to do so.
Can you set a
So we
time,
clear the
please?
vote, could clear the
Can you
floor.
set an exact time, please?
10 after 7,
Okay.
till 10 after 7. Our meeting, folks.
Oh, it's soft.
Commissioners, please take your seats. We're going to get started.
Yes.
Okay, we're ready for, are we back on? Yeah, we're back online. We're ready for item 2, consideration of new construction accessory at 1016 Fair Street. Ben McCreary, applicant. Amanda?
Give me just a second.
Man, who let the cold in? Shut the door.
This will be Victoria Hensley's report. She'll go ahead and give that to you.
Thank you, Amanda. The applicant is seeking a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of a 1.5-story single-bay accessory structure and the demolition of a prefabricated structure at the rear of the property located at 1016 Fair Street. This item did appear before the DRC at the November 15th meeting, and then it was deferred at the December 13th Historic Zoning Commission meeting. So the accessory structure is located at the rear left corner of the property, and it is situated behind the main structure. The scale is 1.5 stories, and the height is subordinate to the principal building at 21 feet 4 3/4 inches. The materials are consistent with the guidelines, with woodlap siding at a 5-inch exposure that is similar to the materials found on the principal building. The applicant is proposing a large dormer on the right side elevation of the accessory structure. The guidelines recommend that dormers should relate to the style and proportion of windows on the principal structure and should be set back a minimum of 2 feet from the exterior wall. While the applicant does have the larger dormer set back 2 feet and has placed it on the interior of the lot, the dormer is out of proportion with historical equivalents, and therefore it's only mostly consistent with the guidelines. However, it is placed in such a way that it has limited visibility from street views. We would also like to note that there is a prefabricated structure on the property, and its removal is appropriate. Therefore, it is recommended that the Historic Zoning Commission approve the new accessory structure with the following conditions. The windows must have historic profile and dimension and consist of either wood or a wood composite material. The window specifications must be provided to the preservation planner or the Historic Zoning Commission prior to the issuance of a building permit, and the application must meet all of the requirements of the Building and Neighborhood Services Department prior to the issue of a building permit, and any additional changes to the approved plans must be returned to the preservation planner or the Historic Zoning Commission for review and approval. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. McCreary, welcome.
Yeah.
Do you have any comments?
I have nothing additional to add.
Okay, are there any citizens who wish to comment on the application? I don't think we have the...
All my supporters left.
Oh,
Sorry. So.
You did something to them.
I know, right?
Okay, we're ready then for commission deliberations. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move to approve with conditions a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of the accessory structure based on staff analysis and recommendation dated January 10th, 2022.
Thank you. Is there a second? Thank you, Brian. I am assuming that also, that motion would also include the removal of the accessory structure too. That wasn't in the...
Yes, it doesn't require a permit to remove it, so we just wanted to note that in case someone wondered what was there, that it is not historic, and the applicant can move it at whatever time he or she sees fit.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, what is the height of the home?
Do you have that handy? I sent you. I can look it up real quick, but.
We did have that information. It might be in an email. Unfortunately, this item was deferred from last month, so we haven't completed any new analysis for it. So if you want that information, I can try to pull that up momentarily. But the applicant, the existing home, but the applicant, 06. Oh, thank you. I hadn't looked at this in a while. So this is the proposed. I believe the question is the existing. But Mr. McCreary had told us that it would be shorter than the house. I think he's trying to find that information.
Okay, so the principal house is 23 feet along
So
Fair
it would
Street.
be
Right, so
2 feet short,
it's about 2 feet shorter, but again, we have a 1 in 30 fall, so every
That
30
it has
feet it
some
drops
fall
a foot
to
behind
the
the
lot.
house, so it'll feel
I
shorter.
personally think that this reads more as a guest quarters than a garage. I'm okay with that as long as doesn't look like it's taller. But I do think that lot falls.
It does.
And you're below. Yeah. That was my only.
Okay. Any other questions? Ready to vote then. All in favor of the motion to approve with conditions, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great, good job.
Thank you.
And I did want to add for the record that Commissioner Denton has joined us for this item and the remainder of the agenda, correct? Okay.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
That Mr. Denton's joined us. I just want the
I'm sorry.
vote to be
Yes, I was supposed to announce that. Sorry.
reflective. No problem. Thank you.
Okay, item number 3, consideration of alteration side porch at 315 3rd Avenue South. Ron Crutcher, applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant is requesting a certificate of appropriateness for alterations to a side porch at 315 3rd Avenue South. The porch that is proposed for alterations is towards the rear left corner. And based on our research with Sanborn Maps, it appears that the porch is in its historic location. However, the materials are not original. The applicant is proposing to use new materials and a new configuration that will better match the porch that was added to the house in 2013. Yes. So this would include wood materials, 2 new posts, a new handrail, and lattice work that matches the lattice work as seen, I believe, in photo number 3. Or not. Okay.
I'll pull up the staff report with that information. Give me just a moment.
So the guidelines recommend that porches stay in their historic locations. But again, we don't know that this is the original configuration. The updated materials would better match the porch that was added in 2013, and it would also be more historically typical to the age of the house itself. So it is recommended that the Historic Zoning Commission approve the alterations with the following conditions. The application must meet all of the requirements of the Building and Neighborhood Services Department prior to issuance of a building permit, and then any additional changes to the approved plans must be returned to the Preservation Planner or the Historic Zoning Commission for review and approval. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Crutcher, your turn to speak. Any comments on this application?
I have no comments. We're in full agreement with the staff recommendations, and we're prepared to get a building permit Wednesday morning, subject to your all's approval tonight.
Thank you. Okay, we're ready for a motion. Are there any citizens who wish to comment on this application?
I would make the motion to approve if there aren't any citizens, with staff comments.
Okay, Mary, motion to approve, and Josh has seconded it. Any discussion? Ready to vote? All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Archie, you did it again.
Thank you.
Item 4, consideration of alteration solar installation at 103 Everbright Avenue, Jessica Powers, applicant. Amanda, is this you?
It's Victoria.
Victoria, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant is requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the installation of solar plant panels on the house located at 103 Everbright Avenue. This item appeared before the DRC at its December 20th meeting. The guidelines recommend that panels be positioned behind existing architectural features to limit visibility and should use a color that is compatible with the building's roof materials. 10 of the solar panels will be located behind the front ridge line, and then 8 will be located on the rear, more towards the left side of the house. The guidelines also recommend that panels be placed on elevations that are not highly visible from the public right-of-way. Again, the panels are going to be placed towards the rear of the house, so they will not be visible from Everbright Avenue. There's a tree line that blocks most of the view from Columbia Avenue. And as we discussed at DRC, there may be visibility from the alley behind 103 Everbright Avenue, but there are some trees that blur that view shed as well. The applicant has indicated that the panels will be black in order to better match the color of the roof, and that the panels will not project from the roof any more than 4 to 4.5 inches. Therefore, it is recommended that the Historic Zoning Commission approve the solar panels installation with the following conditions. The applicant must utilize a darker panel color to blend in with the color of the roofing material in accordance with the guidelines. The application must meet the requirements of the Building and Neighborhood Services Department prior to the issuance of a building permit, and any changes to the approved plans must be submitted to the Preservation Planner or the Historic Zoning Commission for approval prior to work commencing. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Go ahead. Just introduce yourself, please, for the record.
Brian Seal from Solar Titan.
Thank you. Do you have any other comments on the application?
Nope,
It's
sure
the
don't.
same as we discussed at
Yep.
design review, right?
Yep.
Are there any citizens which comment on the application? Hearing none, then we need a motion from the commission.
Mr. Chairman,
Yeah, Ken.
I move to approve conditions certificate of appropriateness for the proposed solar installation at 103 Everbright based on staff analysis and recommendations.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mary. Any discussion?
I did look at the Department of Interior's guidelines. I think we'll have more of these coming, and I do believe this complies with what they recommend, so I agree with staff.
Okay.
And I will just say, I just reiterate, I don't think it'll affect my vote here, but I reiterate my concern that there is an alleyway that is a public right-of-way from my view behind this home. I'm very familiar. I've walked down that alley many times. And based on staff's comments and my experience, that is pretty well screened. I feel comfortable about it, but I do think that that's something that people need to be cognizant of in applying where there is a right-of-way to the rear of the home. Because
Good point.
I drove through, after our last design review, I was driving through Brentwood, and somebody had put these solar panels on the front of their home, and it is interesting, so.
Yeah, there needs to be extreme sensitivity in historic districts as to how these are applied. And this project shows that, but we need to
Remember that.
remember
I
that.
think especially because here we do have, this is not a situation where there's one right-of-way, there are three. You've got front, side, and rear, which is, I think that is a very sensitive property.
Okay, any other comments?
I
I will say something to support this particular product too. Some of them are uglier than others. This is a low profiler.
Yeah.
It's also set back 18 inches from the ridge line, so it is masked a little bit further away from the view, the vantage point as well.
I think for me, the screening in the rear of the home is what makes the difference. If that wasn't screened as it is, I'd have a lot more concerns based on that requirement with the right-of-way. So,
Okay, any other comments?
It's a big house too.
Ready to vote? All in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Done.
Thank you all.
Last but not least. Okay, we are ready for the next item, number 5. It's consideration of demolition, freestanding canopy, alterations, window, and additions at 117 Lewisburg Avenue. Kevin Coffey, applicant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The applicant is requesting a COA for a series of work, the demolition of a freestanding canopy at the rear of the structure, the removal of a left facade historic window opening, the construction of a side addition at the rear portion of the right facade, and then also the construction of a rear addition. You can see on the screen where those two additions are, here and here. The left window is around here, and then the canopy is in the area where the addition's proposed. This has been before DRC twice. Once an associate of the applicant brought it forward in November, and then the applicant brought it forward again in December to help answer more questions. The demolition consists of the removal of that freestanding canopy. Just to remind you, that is on the screen in this top left photo. The guidelines recommend against the demolition of historic buildings and structures. The applicants included photographs to show the canopy. It is not historic. While its exact construction date is unknown, it's very apparent it's not historic, and its removal will not have an adverse impact on the property or the district. The additions, the guidelines recommend that additions be designed to be clearly contemporary and compatible with the proportions, form, materials, and details of the building, and be limited to no more than half the footprint of the original building. So I'll go back to this handy sheet the applicant provided. The original building in our guidelines is defined as anything that's at least 50 years in age. Again, that is based on the Secretary of Interior standards benchmark for what may be considered historic, and it allows our community to manage growth and change and not freeze growth, change over time. The historic building must be clearly identifiable in its physical integrity, not compromised by the new addition, as the approach is that we unify that structure and the new construction into a single architectural whole. So the guidelines do support placement of additions on rear obscured elevations with limited visibility, and I believe we do have that here. The side addition is consistent of a very low-pitched hipped roof form. It's hidden behind the original structure, about 33 feet from the front wall, behind a bay that bumps out here. The proposal is on the right side of a 1950s addition that was added. We believe it to be about 1950s. We do have we have noted that there are sandboard maps for this area, but conveniently, this particular property is just not shown on that, which is unfortunate. But given the shape and the location of this addition, it does feel to staff to be of a 1950s vintage. I do support the applicant's claim in that. Given the Secretary of Interior standards recommendations on 50 years in age or more, even if this building was built in 1972 now, it would, anything pre-1972 would be considered potentially historic by that. So given that, staff is pretty comfortable with recommending that this is in fact a historic addition if the owner wants to keep that. So the addition is proposed to be placed there. It is at 137 square feet. I'm going to move ahead and show you that elevation. You can see on the proposed right side elevation where that is sitting. It is subservient in size and intricacy. It's offset, and this roof form's differentiated from that. It is unclear if that rests entirely underneath the eave of the existing historic addition, so that would be a condition of approval that it does do that. As for the rear addition, you can see that on the bottom of the screen here. The proposal is situated entirely at the back of the residence. It measures 1,094 square feet. It's composed of a hipped roof at the living room designed to appear like a glassed-in element, 2 flat roof forms, which would be at that mudroom and at the laundry room, and then a gabled form over the new interior stairs. The applicant indicated that they would need to adjust the roof line slightly to make the stairs more safe. So that is what you see at this gabled form here. The forms are mostly compatible with the historic structure, while the location of the rear addition will obscure a hexagonal, if I can never say that, a hexagon-shaped portion that you see currently right here. The guidelines do support alteration of roof lines at rear or obscured elevations, and it should be noted that the same architectural detail is proposed to remain untouched and highly visible on the front facade. So I'll just go back to the photographs. You can see, I don't know, yes, you can see that right here. So that will remain on the structure as a unique architectural feature to help define that style for that building. Whereas the rear is where alterations are more comfortably recommended, and it would not disappear in its entirety from the structure. Again, it's not clear if these additions that are flatter in roof are entirely falling underneath the existing eave line, so that would be a recommendation as a condition for approval. And the materials for both additions have not been listed, though it appears that the applicant's planning to use a lap siding. We're missing information on foundation, roofing, and window specifications, although it is typical that window specifications come at a later date. The cumulative addition size and lot coverage, if we're looking at both additions proposed in tandem with the house in the existing accessory structures on the lot, the cumulative coverage would be about 18% of the lot. So this is a fairly significantly sized lot, and that would meet the guidelines. The proposed additions combined onto the historic structure measures approximately 40%, which is also consistent with the guidelines that recommend additions measure no more than half of the footprint of the historic building, or structure portions of the building that have gained historic significance. Now moving on to that left elevation. I might skip it somewhere. Forgive me. Right here. So the top portion is the existing conditions. You can see that there is a window here that the applicant is proposing to close and shutter, or give the appearance of being a closed set of shutters that would imply that a window has been there or is still currently there. That is a practice that has been used occasionally on historic homes. The proposal is to remove the window entirely and use that closed shutter treatment to give the appearance. The guidelines do recommend against the removal, altering, or obscuring of historic windows. So the window is on a more visible location of the historic building, so its removal is not supported by the guidelines. So with that, it is recommended the commission approve the proposal with the conditions, and I do have them numbered 1 through 7, so you can refer to them as that when you make your motion. But the conditions would be that the left elevation window would not be altered, obscured, or removed in any way as recommended by the guidelines. Number 2, that all flat roofed additions identified on page 11 and called out specifically in my condition by area must tie into the existing structure at points underneath that existing eave. That the siding must consist of a wood or cementitious material with a profile and reveal to match the existing structure. That roofing materials must match those on the existing structure, and that TPO, a rubber membrane, is an appropriate building material for the flat roofed areas. Materials must be submitted to staff for review and approval prior to issuance of a building permit. The foundation materials, too, must be approved by staff prior to issuance of a building permit. I do not believe that the foundation materials can match exactly, but I do believe that there are some materials that can be used to be compatible, and I'll let the applicant elaborate on that. All new windows must have historic profile and dimension and consist of either wood or a composite material emulative of wood. And again, those must be submitted to staff for review and approval prior to permitting. The final condition is the standard condition that this must meet all the requirements of BNS prior to issuance of a permit. And if the applicant proposes any changes to the approved plans that you see today or approved today, that would come back to staff or the commission for consideration. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Coffey, welcome.
I just have a couple short comments to make. On the siding, we do intend to match the exposure of the existing siding on the house. There's kind of a hodgepodge of aluminum, vinyl, wood going on the house, and we're not proposing to replace all of that on the house, but at least match the exposure on the additions. Amanda's comment about the flat roof areas, I would say that the addition to the right side of the house, it's very easy to accomplish doing that and having the entire roof land under the existing eave. I would make a comment that we could do that on the back where we've added on. I just don't think it's a great building practice. I've got a section right in the middle that's probably about 14 feet long where I would rather slope it back, cover the eave on that 14-foot section that's already basically encompassed with additions anyway. And that'll let us get just a little bit higher ceiling in that room and also interface that existing roof without there being a bug and spider web catcher underneath that eave. Yeah, just like where you had the right there. Yeah, just that center section where that roof goes into interface. So basically, I don't think it would be anything that would really inhibit someone's ability to view the distinctive forms right there, especially since we've already kind of encompassed both sides of that. So that would be my thought on that, and you guys can rule which way you feel on that. The side window, we would really love to be able to do the treatment we proposed. While it is visible somewhat on the left side, and I don't really have a photo to show this, but there is a bay that projects next to the window that protrudes a bit from the house, and it does kind of block the diagonal view of that window. We did note Brian had made a comment in the last meeting about maybe furring out a part behind the window, and it kind of gets into some insulation questions and other things like that. And I do think it's a fairly common treatment over the years to modify window openings. So again, just we'd love to have that, and those are really the comments that I have.
Anything else?
Nope.
Okay. Are there any citizens who wish to comment on the application? Hearing none, we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve with staff conditions 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and condition 2 as to the closet portion, but not as to the portion that Mr. Coffey explained that's in the back of the house. Approve with those conditions a certificate of appropriateness for.
All right, say that again. Approve
Yes.
1, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.
And a portion of 2, the portion of 2 related to the closet on the side of the home.
And after the applicant's explanation, staff is comfortable with that as well.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ken. Discussion.
I
All right.
I know on the back, on the rear of the property, So we're going to lose, it looks like, 1, 2, 3, 4 historic windows, and maybe a historic door. Is the door that comes out to the back porch, is that a historic door?
I don't believe it's a historic door.
And I'll tell you the reason for my comments, so
Okay.
we can move on to that. Were you able to incorporate any of those windows in any of the additions that are going on the house?
So I was not, and the reason is that the scale of the rooms where I possibly could use them, like a laundry room, I need to be 3 feet up off the floor with those, and they're very tall windows at the back hexagonal piece, so I'm not really able to reuse those. And the only other areas where we could reuse them are additions in the back, but we want to keep a really consistent language on those, of them being the new additions to the house. So, and also the closet, it's really not appropriate to put one of the very large windows in that. So that's kind of what our approach was on that. If that makes sense.
And I realize in hexagon, I mean, those are probably 80 some odd
Yeah,
inches tall.
They're tall.
But then you have 2 smaller ones that flank the door. And I was wondering if those could be repurposed on the left side where you have the laundry room and the mudroom.
Oh, so those are actually newer windows, the ones that are in the back that flank the door. And I believe they were put in there when the kitchen was remodeled previously. Now, I possibly could use those in the laundry room. And we could make every effort to try to use those and see if they work. But I don't think they're like 100-year-old windows or anything. So
Is the one in the powder room old with that glasswork design in the top?
You know, it is actually. It
Could
is
that be
older.
reused in the closet or?
Yeah, I think we could probably reuse that in the closet.
Could the 2 long windows in the little bay that you've got coming out on the back?
No, that's what I was trying to speak to with Brian's comment, is the 2 taller windows that are right now in a guest room. They don't really match the language that we're trying to do at the addition, because we're trying to make the addition look new. And to me, taking windows of that style would push it back into that older look. And really, they're a little bit too tall to really use in any of the other minor spaces. So it's kind of my approach there.
Okay, I mean, if they won't work, they won't work. I don't really, in my brain, agree with, quote, the language, the language of the new edition, because I think pieces of a house that tell a story kind of trump consistency in an old house, in my mind, but I will take your word if you can't repurpose them there.
Yeah, there's,
And the ones that I was mainly referring to are the smaller ones, because there are like 4.
Yeah, they could be reused. I was just going, okay, now we're reusing the small ones. Could we reuse the large ones?
And that'd be ideal. I
tall
wish they
ones.
could. So Mr. Coffey.
In the bay.
Where the powder room window is, it has the crosshatch
yes.
in the top, where might you reuse that one?
I think the place to use that would be in the closet.
And that would be, where is that on the?
That's on the right side elevation. Right now, we have a double hung window shown there, I believe, hopefully.
I can, just for the sake of making sure everyone's on the same page, I'm literally going to show it on the page, on the screen. Mr. Coffey
Yeah.
does have a double hung 4/4 window shown in that side addition on the flanking the right side of the building. So if there is a recommendation to maintain any windows for reuse, I would encourage the commission to include that as part of the motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to amend the motion.
All right.
That the powder room double hung sash window be reused on the right side elevation for the closet addition.
I'll second that.
And just to make sure everyone knows which window you're talking about, I'm going to go to the rear, and can you point out specifically which window you would like proposed for reuse? I'm not sure I know where the powder room is. I don't.
It's, if you're exiting the back door, it's to the right.
This window right here?
That's it.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And that does not have shutters on it.
No, and I can take or leave the shutters on the right side elevation too at the closet addition.
Okay, the motion, or the amendment that I've got is existing powder room double-hung windows be reused for the closet side addition. Is that,
On the right elevation.
any comments? Ready to vote?
Does staff have a recommendation as to whether the shutters that are shown in the new
No.
plans stay or
There's a
not?
good mix on this house of shuttered and not shuttered.
Okay, any comments then on the amendment? Any other comments
Not on the amendment.
on the
But-
amendment?
Yeah, I have a comment about
Okay,
the
all right,
chimney.
let's get the amendment done,
Okay.
and then we'll talk about the other. Then, ready to vote on the amendment. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed to that? Okay, that's unanimous. Now, Lisa, you want to talk about the main motion as amended? Question on that? Go ahead.
Yeah, main motion.
As amended.
As amended. I just wanted to make certain, I think this came up at design review, about the height of the chimney, that it's not visible from the front facade.
It's not at all.
We-
It's
And we
well
know
below
that
the
even
ridge.
though I don't see measurements of the chimney here.
Well, if you look at the rear elevation,
Mhm.
that is the exact height of it in
Mhm.
relationship to the main ridge. So being below the ridge, there's no way you would see it from the front.
Okay, thank you.
I don't really think you're going to see anything from the
No.
front,
No, not
except
at all.
that little jut out on that, when
right
I'm looking
side.
at the left side
Right.
right now.
Correct.
And that's minuscule.
Right.
All right, then are we ready to vote on the main motion? Are there any more comments on the main motion as amended? If not, all in favor of the main motion as amended, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Good, golden, thank you.
Thanks. Go
Thank
watch.
you.
Thanks for the starts.
Go watch some football.
That's right. Oh, there's a game? Okay. Are there any other items?
No, just to remind you, we'll send out the DRC agenda tomorrow, just as soon as we can.
Okay, and then do you have an idea of how many items we have for design review?
I know of at least 4 at the moment.
Is that
I
is the Franklin Grove going to come to design review?
I don't believe so, unless I get a request tonight for that item to be placed. Right now, we have Emily and Acres, a request for Lewisburg Avenue proposal, and Factory at Franklin, and I believe a 3rd Avenue proposal and a sign proposal.
Okay.
So I haven't checked my email since like 3:30.
Okay, that's fine, that's fine. All right, then I need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, Brian. Second, thank you, Josh, for the second. All in favor, say aye, and thank you, Ken.
Ken, thank you.